Good afternoon. I'm Marco Machete, and I am the board president for the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. We're honored to welcome you to our 2025 induction ceremony honoring Bob Freckmann. As we celebrate Bob's life work as a plant taxonomist and conservationist, we hope you are inspired to continue your own conservation pursuits, whatever they may be. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show.
The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation was created in 1984 to encourage the growth and practice of a conservation ethic as a legacy for the people of Wisconsin, just as our inductees did. The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is a nonprofit organization guided by a board of directors. Voting member organizations represent more than 30 conservation organizations from around the state. Each year, the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame inducts up to 3 people. To date, there are over 108 inductees who have been honored. You can learn about each of these conservation champions on the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame website. Any person, group of people, or organization can nominate someone for induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Nominees have many environmental and conservation backgrounds and varying types of education and experience. From writers to artists, educators to policymakers, from researchers and managers, Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame heroes come from all backgrounds and walks of life. The Hall of Fame accomplishes its mission of advancing the conservation ideal by inducting individuals who have contributed significantly to conservation in Wisconsin and the nation. Based on standards and criteria set forth by the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Board of Directors, all inductees must have significant ties to Wisconsin, and their contributions must have wide-reaching impact affecting a range of natural resources. To maintain objectivity in the selection of inductees, a Board of Governors was created to recommend inductees for selection. Each summer, a 5-member Board of Governors reviews nominations. The highly esteemed governors are an independent body and have in-depth knowledge of Wisconsin's conservation history. The governors select nominations to move forward to the Board of Directors and voting member organizations for their consideration. The board members and organization representatives select the upcoming year's inductees from that list of finalists at their annual selection meeting. While voting membership in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is only open to organizational members of the foundation, individuals may participate in the mission by providing annual support. The financial support of member organizations and individuals allows the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame to celebrate, advance, and share Wisconsin's conservation legacy as it hosts induction ceremonies and maintains inductee archives. Going forward, the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame strives to share stories of our inductees through the website and outreach programs to inspire the next generation of conservation heroes. We invite you to learn more about the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and Wisconsin's conservation heritage by visiting our website at wchf.org.
It would be impossible to fit all of Bob's accomplishments into one induction ceremony, but we've prepared a video montage and we hope you enjoy learning about Bob's life and work. This montage, as well as the entire induction ceremony, will be available to be viewed online after today's ceremony. We hope you enjoy. We'd now like to thank the generous sponsors that made the 2025 induction ceremony possible. At the platinum level, the Aldo Leopold Foundation, longstanding partners of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and one of our voting member organizations. At the gold level, Richard Hemp, current Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame board member. At the silver level, the North Central Conservancy Trust, dedicated to protecting conservation lands in north central Wisconsin. The Thrivent practice of Jason Machete, providing advice, insurance, investments, banking, and generosity, located in Madison. At the bronze level, the Winnebago Audubon Society, the Ice Age Trail Alliance, and the Wisconsin Outdoor Communicators Association, both voting member organizations, and individual contributions from Tom Hauge, Kathleen Falk, Christine Thomas, Todd Ames, and Marco Machete. At the supporter level, Sharon Gaskill, Jerry Knuth, Ruth Ann Lee, Kurt Miney, and Peter McKeever. In-kind supporter, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, for providing technology support throughout the ceremony today. We'd also like to thank all of our 34 voting member organizations. To learn more about these organizations, or perhaps nominate your organization, scan the code on the screen now. And lastly, perhaps you'd consider supporting us so that we can continue to honor the legacy of Wisconsin conservation heroes into the future. Any amount would help us to maintain this ceremony next year and beyond. Thanks for joining, and we'd sure appreciate your support. Our next speaker is Emmett Judowitz, retired professor of biology at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point.
Hi, I'm Emmett. I'm a retired professor of botany at UW-Stevens Point. I've known Bob Freckmann for 44 years, and he's one of the most remarkable people I ever known, either personally or professionally. His knowledge of Wisconsin plants is just incredible. And I'm trying to strain to describe what's so great about him, but his altruism in conserving Wisconsin's natural resources. It's so far-reaching and diverse. Not only does he know the plants of Wisconsin really well, but he can work with other people. He is quite nonpartisan, and he can bring consensus to very difficult land decisions. And he's persistent over time, persistent and patient in getting land preserved. And so he's worked with many, many organizations. The North Central Conservancy Trust is a founder of that, and it's an expanding network that's really preserved lots of land in the 8 counties in central Wisconsin. He's a great bird watcher who's organized the Christmas bird count for the Audubon Society here in Point. He's been very active in the Botanical Club since its founding 50 years ago, and he's an excellent professor. He had over 5,000 students, and I did a lot of field trips with students at Point over the years, all the way to the West Coast of Hawaii. And whatever park we came to or national forest, there would be people who had Bob as a professor and remembered him fondly and his knowledge of plants and conservation. Even internationally, when I traveled to New Zealand, one of the leading botanists in New Zealand is actually a former Freckmann student. That's Heidi Mute in Wellington. So it's just like he's a passport. You go anywhere in the States, and you mentioned Bob Freckmann, people know who he is, what he does, what he's responsible in terms of conservation. Particularly, I want to talk about Bob's contributions to state natural areas. These are areas that deserve to be preserved throughout the state of Wisconsin, and he's been instrumental in surveying them all over the state. And with the Botanical Club of Wisconsin, he's led so many field trips I can't even imagine. It must be hundreds over the last 50 years. I'm sure he's reached tens of thousands of people directly in person at these talks. I'd also like to call attention to the Robert Freckmann Herbarium, named after Bob. It started with less than 1,000 plant specimens, and now it's 250,000, and about the second biggest in Wisconsin after the Madison Herbarium and with the Milwaukee Public Museum Herbarium. This herbarium documents biodiversity in Wisconsin. Many of the collections, most of them actually have been made by Bob and his students. and my students also, because of his 5,000 students, they all had to collect plans for their field, for their class, plant taxonomy class. And so we've got a magnificent selection of a survey of the state of Wisconsin and its present biodiversity of the last 50 years, which will be invaluable as the climate changes over the next half century or so. We'll be able to understand what the changes have been. And Bob built this up from zero, and he's contributed tens of thousands of dollars of his own money to keep the herbarium running at a high level. And it's just an amazing resource for central Wisconsin and the entire state of Wisconsin. So in conclusion, thank you, Bob. You contributed so much to me, my life, my students' life, uh, the central Wisconsin region, and the entire state of Wisconsin by your efforts. You've done an amazing job, and you well deserve to be in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Theodore S. Cochran, Senior Academic Curator Emeritus with the Wisconsin State Herbarium.
Ted Cochran. I am a retired curator of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Herbarium in Madison. I suspect that I first met Bob as early as about 1972, when we were both members of the Botanical Club of Wisconsin, and were both serving on the board of directors of that organization. We would bump into each other then more and more often with my visits to Stevens Point or his visits to Madison, and our mutual appearances at Botanical Club functions. During his long academic career, Bob demonstrated a prodigious work ethic and dedication to teaching and research. As well, he poured at least an equal amount of passion into fieldwork, gardening, and conservation. He taught many different courses to generations of UW-Stevens Point students. He continues to watch over the UW-Stevens Point Herbarium, now called the Robert W. Freckmann Herbarium, and he always finds time to assist anyone who comes to him with questions and requests. Bob's contributions to conservation in Wisconsin are diverse. He has prepared field reports on numerous areas, whether out of personal interest or when previewing for field trips, or as an environmental consultant at the request of private conservation groups and companies. Work for the Nature Conservancy, the Ice Age Trail Alliance, the North Central Conservancy Trust, and Flark Associates Incorporated has involved wetland and endangered species surveys, proposed timber sales, proposed pipeline and power line routes, trail locations, and ecological analyses of highway rights-of-way. For the entirety of his career, Bob has given quiet but credible guidance to many conservation efforts. For example, his long-running advocacy on behalf of Powers Bluff required contending with Wood County Parks and Forestry Department and the county board over management of the forest and the amount of development planned. Authorities were finally convinced to establish 70 acres of the park as a natural area. He and other friends of Powers Bluff have dealt with adjacent and nearby property owners, successfully applied for Knowles Nelson's stewardship money, and eventually acquired a neighboring farm to increase the area of the park. Another success is Skunk and Foster Lakes, a cluster of 5 undeveloped pothole lakes embedded in hilly forested terrain in Waupaca County. There, he led a contingent of state legislators on a nature walk, impressed upon them the area's natural history values, and suggested multiple times during the course of their time together that it sure would be nice if the state were able to buy a sufficiently large chunk of land to save those little lakes and some of the lovely forest. Soon afterwards, the state did acquire the property, which was designated a state natural area in 1996. And as a stalwart member of the North Central Conservancy Trust, of which he is a co-founder, he continues to do field surveys, advise on priorities, and help oversee conservation easements. Bob is a remarkably gentle and patient man. I value his core values, which include dependability, helpfulness, honesty, and the ability to be non-judgmental. His loyalty has built trust in personal and professional relationships and has strengthened the various organizations to which he belongs. These include garden clubs, local Ice Age Trail and Audubon Society chapters, the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters, and the Botanical Club of Wisconsin, of which he is a charter member. Bob is an excellent botanist. Above all, his lifelong passion for land is inspirational. We will never know how many seeds may have been planted in the minds of students or citizens who attended his classes, field trips, workshops, or talks. Seeds that have stimulated graduate level research, worked to protect specific species or habitats, or supported our public lands and waters.
Our next speaker is Sharon Schwab, former student and longtime colleague and friend of Dr. Freckmann.
I have the pleasure today of reading a letter from Dr. Alan Haney, retired Dean of the College of Natural Resources, an exceptional land restorationist, prolific author, and a friend to Dr. Robert Freckmann. Those who know him casually simply know him as Bob. Those who are more acquainted with him, knowing him as a leading regional authority on plant identification. Those who know him best will tell you that he is a true Renaissance man, an authority on trains, and a scholar of opera and classical music. It is not surprising that Bob is one of the most entertaining conversationalists you'll ever meet. There is scarcely a subject about which Bob can't speak with some knowledge, offering a tidbit, if not an entire buffet of little-known information. You wouldn't know it, however, unless you have an opportunity to spend time with him. He is a quiet and modest man. Although he has been officially retired for many years from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point after 40 years of teaching and research, and where he became a legend among the thousands of students he taught, you can still find him nearly every workday at his desk in the recesses of the second largest herbarium in Wisconsin, a research and teaching collection of more than 230,000 plants that he began in 1968 after arriving in Stevens Point. There, surrounded by stacks of books and reprints and files of plant specimens, he is busy working on his latest project, a treatise on ferns and reworking the grasses of Wisconsin. One of the many enigmas surrounding Bob is how a boy growing up in inner city Milwaukee with relatively uneducated parents in a modest home surrounded by pavement and industry became a leading authority on plants of the Midwest and a leading defender of natural areas in central Wisconsin. When asked, Bob laughingly suggested that when all you have is your natural environment is a few weeds, you come to pay them careful attention. The real answer, however, is his insatiable curiosity about a world, a trait he may have inherited from his father, his mother, who can trace her genealogy to English nobility, gave Bob his appreciation of opera and classical music. Perhaps the merging of his father's German curiosity and English appreciation of the arts resulted in the rare phenotype we know as Bob Freckmann. Escaping the limitations of the city by way of Washington High School, Bob found that it was biology that most stimulated his maturing mind. And it was the influence and guidance of several teachers that led him to pursue his career through University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and Iowa State University. Although interested in many subjects from chemistry to architecture, it was his first course in plant taxonomy that most excited him. When told that grass taxonomy was too challenging for undergraduates, Bob rose to the challenge that would shape his future. He turned down an offer to study at UW-Madison to work with the leading grass authority at Iowa State. Bob was instrumental in the development of North Central Conservancy Trust. When a few people in Portage County concerned by development that was threatening natural areas joined forces with a group in Wausau, NCCT was organized and became Central Wisconsin's Land Trust, one of the largest in Wisconsin, now serving landowners in 8 counties and holding conservation easements on just over 5,000 acres. Most, if not all, of the more than 50 easement properties have been surveyed by Bob, who continues to be a primary volunteer in identifying important conservation benefits in prospective easements and helping landowners recognize them. Although conservation easements provide permanent protection recognized by the federal government, they do not restrict agriculture or forestry as long as they do not threaten the important conservation values the easements were designed to protect. Thus, conservation easements are ideal instruments for protecting remaining natural habitats, especially those important to rare or declining native species. Bob is often the first representative of NCCT to meet with landowners who wish to explore a conservation easement to protect their property in perpetuity. Bob's interests in conservation go far beyond his special interests and expertise in plants. Since the early years of its development, Bob, in partnership with his late wife, Sally, provided much support for the Ice Age Trail, especially in Portage and Waupaca counties. Bob and Sally were leaders in developing and coordinating the cooperative landowners who permitted the trail to cross their properties. Without volunteers like Bob, organizations like NCCT and the Ice Age Trail Alliance would not exist. Bob epitomizes the ideal volunteer, providing persistent, reliable support and lending his expertise and ability to work effectively with others as needed. The Aldo Leopold Audubon Society is one of the more successful Audubon clubs in the state. From inception, Bob has served as a board member, an officer, trip leader, and a regular contributor to the Christmas bird count, one of the most successful citizen science initiatives in the United States. Although Bob's expertise in botany greatly exceeds that in ornithology, he is very good at identifying birds. Coupled with his vast knowledge of the many habitats of the region, his trips are always a delight, with observations and discussions that range far beyond birds. It is impossible to recount all the contributions Bob has made to the university, the community, and conservation in central Wisconsin. Just as he began the nationally recognized Freckmann herbarium in a janitor's closet, he began promoting conservation before most local people realized that unless we made it a priority, our children and grandchildren would not have the beautiful, biologically rich heritage we enjoy. Perhaps because he was deprived of having easy access to nature as a child, he became more aware of how important it is to the human welfare. It is because of people like Bob that Wisconsin's conservation heritage is alive and well. What a magnificent legacy he has created and expands every day. Thank you. As a former student of both undergraduate and graduate student of Bob Freckmann, I'd like to take a few minutes to share a perspective that I had. Thank you very much. If lucky, a person comes along who changes the trajectory of one's life for the better. Robert Bob W. Freckmann is such a person. Throughout his career, he has touched the lives of thousands of university students, members of conservation organizations, adult learners, senior citizens, agency staff, the public, and me. His work in plant taxonomy is simply stated remarkable. The UW Stevens Point Herbarium that now bears his name is a tribute to his enormous contributions to this field of conservation that provides a showcase for his life's work. The herbarium is a gift to the university system, the state of Wisconsin, the United States, the world. People have joked that Bob can identify a panicum grass species from the length of a football field. One just needs to hold the specimen up high enough. In truth, he's almost always looking down at plants, so much that he is easily lost. I can attest to this, as having gotten rather lost with him in a small parcel in Washira County, Wisconsin. Yet he's not going out alone. I recall him telling students in plant taxonomy class before walking on a bog mat that we all needed to take items identifiable to our time. Why? Because if we broke through and fell into the bog's acidic depths, we all had to have things with our bodies for discoverers to find decades or perhaps centuries later. I recall an aquatic plant taxonomy test where he placed not one, but 5 of the same utricularia or bladderwort species to trip everybody up. Who does that? Rumor has it that he did the same thing with Rhus radicans or poison ivy until he finally became sensitive to its toxins, like most of us. Hard to think ill of Bob, but that might have served him right. I didn't like looking at a dissecting scope until I took Bob's vascular plant taxonomy class. But I soon discovered that one could tell plants apart by terms applied to plant coverings such as hispid and hirsute, or plant surfaces such as glabrous and striate. Who knew? It was simply magical. Now, there was somebody who taught with contagious enthusiasm. Rather than the anticipated boredom given to a plant taxonomy class, this seemed like a fun treasure hunt. So I followed Bob as the Pied Piper, taking aquatic plant taxonomy, then agristology, then having him as a graduate advisor, then forming a partnership in a small business, quietly seeking a donor to purchase a unique woodlot, which is now a state natural area, serving on various boards with him, and more. The home, arboretum, wetland, woodlands, and gardens that he shared with his wife, Sally, are forever protected by a conservation easement. I fondly recall when she would make enough food, most of it from their garden, for 60 guests rather than 6. There were always the cats, and of course, Jimmy, the amazing standard pointer, who would sit on the couch like royalty, listening to the banter of conservation or political debates that would also fill the dinner table. More recently, Bob has given home to flying squirrels in the basement, but that's another story. Bob has never sought attention. Yet for more than 50 years, he has consistently identified and cataloged thousands and thousands of plants and published articles about them. I'm among those many who believe that the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame needs Robert W. Freckmann among its ranks. His nomination and his induction today is richly deserved. Thank you very much.
It is now my honor, on behalf of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Board of Directors, Board of Governors, and our voting member organizations, to induct Robert Freckmann into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. We will now hear from Vinnie Moresi, 71st Assembly District Representative, who will share a legislative citation in honor of Bob.
Hello, Dr. Freckmann, State Representative Vincent Moresi here. I want to offer my sincere congratulations to you on a well-deserved induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. For over 5 decades, you've dedicated your life to conservation, education, and being a naturalist. You've inspired thousands of us leading hikes on the Ice Age Trail, conducting botanical surveys for North Central Conservancy Trust, and educating future scientists, conservationists, and naturalists at UWSP, where you've expanded your namesake herbarium to over 230,000 specimens. Your tireless efforts with groups like the Botanical Club of Wisconsin, the Nature Conservancy, and the Wisconsin Wetlands Association have shaped conservation across our state. You've been the expert for so many of us for the guidance in identifying Wisconsin's flora and understanding their ecological significance. Dr. Freckmann, it is my great privilege to present you with this citation of commendation from my office in recognition of your lifelong commitment to protecting Wisconsin's wild places, natural beauty, and for inspiring so many of us on our journey to understand the natural world around us. On behalf of a grateful state, congratulations and thank you for your remarkable contributions. We are better stewards of this land because of you. Thank you.
And we are now thrilled to have Dr. Freckmann join us live from the Central Wisconsin Environmental Station in Amherst Junction, Wisconsin. Hey, Bob, how you doing tonight? Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm doing pretty well. It seems I'm kind of overwhelmed with all of the things that they said about me, and I think perhaps the word hyperbole has been used pretty often in recent years, but I understand what it means now.
Well, you seem like a very humble man, and looking forward to hearing a little more about your life and work. So I love your saying growing up in inner city Milwaukee, and that when there's not much to find as far as plants go, you really start to pay attention. So what was that like, and what are some of your earlier memories of being fascinated by the plants that you were able to find where you lived?
Well, I guess, when you're growing up in a pretty built-up area, and in those days we didn't have a car, you could only reach certain things on foot. Yeah, you start becoming a good observer for what you have, and I think rather than getting bored, every area, every park, every alley and backyard, I mean, they were fascinating. And for some reason or other, I guess some people just find everything boring. And I think probably a lot has to do with my parents, because they always took the time to answer my question. It was never an answer that if I asked them why, the answer was never because I told you. They always explain things, and I think that just stimulates curiosity.
Wow, amazing. And so then you went on to study at UW Milwaukee, and it was your junior year, I believe, that you happened upon a plant taxonomy course. And
Oh, actually, it was my sophomore year.
oh,
The
sophomore year, okay.
second half of the sophomore. I started as a chemistry major, and it was very apparent to me that I didn't belong there, and that perhaps it was a danger to the building that where the lab was. So I switched around. I looked for something else that would be interesting, and just by coincidence, it turned out my brother was still in high school, Washington High School in Milwaukee, and he had Jack Valier as his biology teacher, and one of the assignments was to make a leaf collection. And so I helped my brother, and I think I became much more interested in than he did. And so I took a botany course, and then I took a course in plant taxonomy, and I actually didn't even know what taxonomy was when I started that course. And about 1 month into it, identifying plants, and this was in the spring of the year in Milwaukee. The only thing we had to work on were things that had flowers that had been pickled in formaldehyde, and there was nothing pleasant about working with them, but just the idea of trying to figure out what they were, where they fitted in, it just touched a button. By the end of 1 month, I realized I love it so much. I went to one of the professors teaching the course, Dr. Salomon, and I asked him, I said, what do I have to do to get a job like yours? And he said, well, you got to get good grades, get into graduate school, get a PhD, and so on. And I I turned to him, I said, okay, good, that's what I'll do. And I'm sure he paid no attention to that, but that was exactly what I did, exactly what I planned to do, and I never deviated from that objective.
Amazing. And one of the things that we hope to foster through the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is to encourage the next generation to continue the conservation legacy and ethic in Wisconsin. What guidance or what tips might you have for some of those young professionals or students that are studying conservation and considering pursuing it as a career, as someone who's lived through those ranks? What advice would you have for them now?
To take the time to pursue their interests. One of the things that a lot of students feel, they figure you've got to get great grades and everything. I think you have to cut a little slack, and if somebody really loves one area, give them the chance to develop in that area. So a 4-point grade point is really nice, but if it's a little lower and part of the trade-off is stimulating and working on the things that you really love, I think it's a good trade-off. And I've often said too, when people ask me, young people, should I go to college? Why? And I try to refrain from saying, so you get a better job, and point out that the real objective of a college education, as I put it to them, is diversity of experiences, stimulation, and so on. The objective is so that you never have to say, I'm bored.
And safe to say you haven't felt bored very often in your career as a
there's no
plant
way in the
taxonomist.
world. At my advanced age now, I wish I had several more lifetimes to pursue some of the interests I haven't had a chance to work on.
Amazing. And so tell us a little bit about how, obviously you have a huge legacy at UW-Stevens Point. What was the path that led you to that part of the state and to that university?
Well, when I finished at Iowa State, and incidentally, I went there to work under Dr. Pohl, who was a student working at the Milwaukee Public Museum in the late 30s and early 40s. So there already were some ties there. And after I got my PhD, I went back to the Milwaukee Public Museum, and they were in the middle of building their new museum, which at that time I thought would last forever. Now they're tearing it down or building another smaller one.
Right.
But anyway, I went back there, and I was there just a few months, and I was really the new kid on the block. And then suddenly the director made me the chair of the exhibit committee, which was really making all the decisions on the exhibits and that. And one of the main reasons I got that was that the artists and people building the exhibits were really fighting constantly with the curators, and nobody got along. And being the new kid, I hadn't chosen sides. And I figured, oh, this is wonderful. But a few months into that, I began to realize that this is going to go on probably for several years. And since my love for the things I was studying, for the grasses, for flora, Wisconsin, and so on, I realized all of that was going to be sidetracked by this obligation. And I figured at the last minute, about the middle of April, and Milwaukee, incidentally, was going through some tremendous problems. There was that great riot that broke out. One of the few people that died in that riot was a police officer at that time who had been a neighbor across the street when I was growing up, and just a couple of years younger. And that was a real shock. So anyway, I figured, okay, I got to get out of here. Middle of April, there was a position open at Stevens Point for somebody to teach aquatic plants courses, which was kind of a secondary interest for me. And I applied and I got the job. And I came to start about just before the fall semester that year. And I remember the first thing of the introduction, somebody said, to the young new faculty, said, don't expect too much. These students are coming from small towns and don't have the kind of preparation you might get from people in a major institution coming from a big city. And the first thing I found out was there was no truth in that at all. These students were really remarkable. And the truth was that some of the people I had that very first year achieved a great deal, and some of them became friends of mine for a long time, and some of them really close friends. So after initial experience of realizing that this was a place that had potential, I decided, okay, I'm going to get the herbarium restarted. It had been founded by somebody late in the 19th century with a real good background, and he had left. And so once I started that, I figured, hey, this place had tremendous potential, and I was really happy to be there.
Wonderful. And I love you say that an herbarium to a plant taxonomist is what a library is to a historian.
Yes,
So,
right. I mean, that's your starting point. There are so many things that the herbarium is useful for. Helping identify plants, identifying things sometimes where you only have a little fragment. You can go through a number of possibilities, check out this little piece against something on there. In fact, over the years, among the interesting experiences, I've been called in on 3 different homicide cases to help.
really?
And including one very gory one that was on an hour television program, to identify a tiny little fraction of a grass. And
Wow.
the part of that story is it turned out that by identifying that, the information I provided had nothing to do with solving the case. So I could say, well, I worked on that, but my contribution was meaningless. So anyway, I've lost track of where the questions were.
Yeah, just the herbarium and
Yeah.
the importance of that.
Yeah, there are so many uses for an herbarium. Some are really interesting. Some are things you wouldn't expect. I mean, there's the specimens can provide DNA material. It can there many unrelated things really come from the knowledge in an herbarium. To me, one of the most interesting ones was after World War II, when there was a tremendous interest in finding uranium, and there are certain plants out west, the local weeds, for example, that will tend to concentrate a lot of things from the soil, and they tend to have very narrow distributions. And people could go through the herbarium collection with a Geiger counter and find something that's radioactive. Look at when and where it was collected, and go out and see if there's a place for uranium. I mean, the uses just go on and on.
Wow. So really the world of plants is, from your stories you're sharing now, much wider than I think most people would even fathom.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just, yeah. I used to, when I taught the ethnobotany course, we called it the edible and poisonous plants course. I used to say that the plants that people had and the civilization that they developed really has so much to do with history, where people were concentrated, whether they could move or were tied to a certain habitat. So much of world history is really, when you trace it back, is is determined by botany and by the plants.
Hmm. And so I guess, kind of flagship quote, that conservation begins with knowing species really well. How have you found the world of taxonomy and the world of conservation and wise use of resources? How have you found those two to overlap? And maybe you've charted some of that path as a taxonomist.
Well, that particular statement that conservation begins with knowing a species very well is, if you begin a study of an area, think in terms of possible management, one thing or another, it's kind of like following a recipe, almost like getting a package in the mail and it says some assembly required, and then you go through it. The steps, the first thing it always says is check to see if everything is there. Well, that's sort of where Aldo Leopold started when he said the first requisite of intelligent tinkering is to save all the pieces, and that became the motto of the Nature Conservancy. Well, the next step is, okay, when you check and see you've got all the pieces there and can identify them properly, then the next step is to begin to see how they fit together, what their importance is. So that's where the conservation part begins. It begins at that stage. So that particular saying that I've used from time to time actually is just common sense and perfectly logical.
Yeah, when you put it that way, certainly. Well, you've had certainly you were determined from the outside once you found plant taxonomy and you knew what you wanted to do, but I'm sure you encountered some obstacles along the way, maybe many obstacles. What tools or what approaches did you find that helped you counter that adversity along the way and keep you on the track that you wanted to be on?
Well, one important thing is determination and perseverance, because you don't win every battle, every goal. You have to realize that you're going to lose a few along the way, and part of the outcome of that, I think, is, at least for me and for probably a lot of other people that succeed, is greater determination. You say, okay, I learned something by this. I'm not going to lose the next time. Another part of it, I think, is very important, is keep your sense of humor and never get angry. If getting angry, saying something insulting or whatever just makes any situation worse. So have patience, be persistent, plan exactly what you're going to do in the future. And I mean, I'm not a great believer in just relying on luck. A lot of luck is actually just the real word for it is planning ahead.
Well, you would definitely be evidence of that. Well, yeah, I guess one thing I did want to make sure we brought up, tell us a little bit about some of the special places around central Wisconsin. Since you came here early on in your career and you haven't really left, what's kept you in central Wisconsin, and what are some of the most special places to you in that area?
Well, one of the things that I found particularly interesting is that, first of all, there are two major groups of plants with different histories, especially the history during the Ice Age, the Pleistocene, and so on, reach a dividing line in about this part of the state, sort of a diagonal thing that's been called the tension zone. It's maybe a little bit exaggerated, but it certainly is a major element in that. So that made things interesting. Another is that the botanical history in Wisconsin is geographically uneven, and the Milwaukee Public Museum and the Madison campus were, at least historically, the real points of major botanical field work activity. The Milwaukee Public Museum worked very extensively along Lake Michigan. And in Madison, a lot of people wanted to do a day's work in the field or whatever. They go out of Madison and spend part of the day and then go back to Madison. Especially back in those days, transportation wasn't as good, roads weren't as good. So that was kind of, we went a county or two north, and that was kind of it. And then if you wanted to go on a longer trip, I think most people's attitude was, well, there's no point going 50 miles farther. Let's go all the way up to Vilas, Oneida County in that particular area. And so a lot of botanizing, a lot of field work in that occurred in those two ends in the center of the state around Stevens Point, and that was sort of neglected. So it turned out to be botanically interesting and also in need of field work. And I mean, that just made it all the more attractive and more pleasant.
Wow. So it seems like a central theme running through a lot of your life and work has been simply paying attention to things that maybe a lot of people are just walking past or overlooking, and finding great interest and meaning in those things that maybe we take for granted.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are really key things in science and in being a good observer. Being a careful, patient observer is a very important characteristic.
Yeah, well, that's certainly something we can all take. I know I'm taking that away, and I think we can all take from your work and your legacy. As we I'd love to talk with you all night here, but as we start to wrap up, there any other things you wanted to share, or stories you wanted to share, or shout outs you wanted to give here as we wrap up?
Well, I think that considering the things that are going on right now and the threats that this planet are facing, and I mean, they really are big time. The thing I find most disturbing is the fact that science doesn't get the respect that not only that it deserves, but that we so desperately have to have. And this includes biological, regarding the climate change, regarding so many things. I find it terribly disturbing that people look at science as one of those things. Well, you can believe science, or you could be superstitious, or you can choose your favorite team, or you can all of these things. It's not a choose science if you like it and find something else to replace it. The failure to understand and respect science, I think, is tremendously important, and it's not only the matter of conservation and the environment. There's so many areas right now where we desperately need respect for science. It may not be perfect, but it's the best we have.
Powerful and lasting words. Well, Bob, congratulations again on this well-deserved achievement. And I understand you have a nice group of friends there that is going to celebrate tonight at Suez.
Yes, indeed. I mean, the things that have been said have been, I'm not sure what the right adjective is, but they've been overwhelming. And the people have been treasures my entire life. And I'm so happy to be able to share this moment. And what makes it so special are these people, these friends, these people that I respect so much. And I'm also very, very pleased that most of these people are also well known and well respected throughout the state.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. We're so happy for you, and a well-deserved place in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. This does conclude our 2025 induction ceremony honoring Dr. Bob Freckmann. The entire presentation from tonight will be available on our website in the next couple of weeks once we get everything processed. So be sure to watch it again and enjoy the presentation. We hope that you'll stay in touch with us. We want to thank you for tuning in this evening and sign up for our e-newsletter. And most of all, we certainly appreciate your financial support so that we can continue to honor future conservation heroes well into the future. I'd also like to thank the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point for the technical support throughout our presentations tonight, as well as our administrator, Ruth Ann Lee. This wouldn't be possible without her diligent help. Also, I'd like to thank our board of directors, our board of governors, and the voting member organizations, as well as the nominating teams that arranged Bob's nomination materials. So thank you all so much. We wish you all the best and the best wishes for your conservation pursuits, whatever they may be. We hope to stay in touch and take care. Thank you very much.